So today I want to take a deeper dive into the concept of how tiny houses and or slow travel may be a solution if you are in the midst of a mid-career crisis. Hi, I'm Jeanette, the North Dawn coach, and I'm so glad to have you here with me today. The last two Sunday videos I have posted have delved into the question of tiny house living, and you all have had a great response to those videos. So I want to pursue this line of thinking a little bit more and kind of compare and contrast the idea of tiny house living with something called slow travel and really look at how both or either or of these may be a solution if you are really in the midst of mid-career crisis and looking for some, shall we say, out of the box solutions. So first of all, let me define terms. So tiny house living are probably something that you don't need to find. You're probably familiar with that, but it's a very, very small dwelling that is an affordable option because it's so small. Most people, when they're thinking about tiny houses, are thinking about how they can have a very small monthly cost to it, and we're not talking about a big mortgage. So that's often done in communities of tiny house living, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Now, slow travel. This one you may be familiar with as a term, but it's only recently that it has come onto my radar screen to understand what slow travel is. For me, travel has always been like a vacation travel, something that you plan for, many months beforehand. It could be to a foreign location, it could be something domestic, but it's the kind of thing that you go for like a week or maybe 2 weeks, maybe three at the most. And well, I guess if you're a traveler like me, it hasn't been slow. It's been like, how can we pack in as many options as we possibly can into this particular week long or 2 week long thing? But slow travel, on the other hand, is a whole different concept. And many people are talking about slow travel as a retirement option, or at least an early retirement option. So while you are in a good state of mind, well, good state of mind is true, but actually like good state of body. So, travel is something that you're comfortable with. The idea is in early retirement to go to locations and essentially have a longer term rental in those locations. But what I'm thinking about slow travel for at this juncture is really not even a retirement option at all. It would be really more about a change of location while you continue in a pre retirement mode. So we're talking about still bringing in money. What makes slow travel an option that is, kind of in the tiny house realm of financial freedom is that many times you can go to locations. Now, not all locations are going to be like this, so you have to pick the locations. But from what I understand, there are a number of locations around the world where the cost of living is much less expensive than, well, at least for me, in my location in the US, would be less expensive. And I think for many locations in the US and other countries, going to a different location where the cost of living is less, you settle down on a travel visa for, an extended period of time and enjoy living in really beautiful surroundings and spending a lot less money. Now, for the course of this idea, for really getting the freedom that we're looking at from a financial perspective, what this would allow you is to really cut down on your expenses and still then be bringing in an income from a situation where you either find an employer that it is okay to work from one of these locations and work fully remote, or you take on contract work, or you build out your side gig, so that it is enough of a money making operation that can be handled from that location. Now, the tiny house option is, not that, but it could be paired with the idea of slow travel. So maybe you are in a position where you're fortunate to own a piece of property that you could sell. And with what you make from that property, you invest in a tiny house property, with very little or no monthly expenditure to it. And you then also take your show on the road, so to speak, and move to, temporarily, a variety of different foreign locations in the slow travel mode. Now, of course, they don't have to go together like that. They could be solutions on their own. But the fundamental idea here is that by cutting down on the finance load, the monthly budget load, what you buy yourself is the freedom to consider a number of different career options that you could not consider in the old model. So if you had a big mortgage, then there was a certain amount of, salary that you have to earn to be able to support that idea. Now, why are these options just coming up now? I mean, they seem like, well, yeah, these are interesting ideas, but it's certainly not what I was taught as a, you know, Gen Xer, 50 pluser. It's not what was modeled for me. And that's certainly true in my experience. My upbringing was, essentially you go to work for one, but more likely more than one, right? But because by the time I got into the workforce, that whole model had changed. But you stay in a 9 to 5 sort of a working model through to retirement age, and then you retire. It's sort of like you do this for a while and then you do that for a while, but you don't do a transitional thing in between those ideas. So what's changed about this, that brings this opportunity, are two big things. One is that the overall, I guess, promise of, that, and it really wasn't, it was only really at the beginning of my career that this was in existence, but the overall promise of joining an organization where they had a, defined pension plan, that if you stayed with that organization through to, the, a number of years in your career and ending in retirement, you would get, X amount of dollars. Well, fairly early on in my working experience, that was fairly obsolete, right? That's not something that you generally find these days. What you do find are 401k plans, or 403b plans, things that you contribute into, your organization does matches, and you kind of take it with you as you go. So the first big change is that promise was broken. And so the incentive to stay with one organization or stay in that model has been broken. So that sort of paves the way for creative thinkers, thinkers before me. I'm just getting these ideas from what I am learning from other people who have sort of paved the way on this. But it really opens the door to some different kind of thinking about what the options are in terms of, where you go, what you do, who you do that with. Now, the second big thing that happened is the internet. So, we've been having the benefits and maybe some of the downside, but definitely we have been people who have the internet as part of our experience now for quite a number of years. And then in the pandemic period, one of the big changes, of course, is that we had to go, many of us, not everyone, but many of us went into what can we do in a fully remote scenario, and proved that, oh, actually, for many, many kinds of jobs, it was fully workable. In fact, for my own experience of deciding to put out my shingle, pursue the International Coaching Federation coaching credential, and then ultimately start my own coaching business in, the especially area of mid-career crisis, what has enabled that is the internet, right? So before this, I would have had to figure out all my local clients. But now that we have things like Zoom and Google Meet and Teams and all of those sort of options, I can connect actually quite well in a virtual environment. And that means essentially the world is possible for me in terms of the clients that I can bring in. And that has certainly been true so far as I've, been on this entrepreneurial journey, that I have had such great exposure to many, many more people from all over the world that I didn't have earlier. So that means that with those two changes, then the opportunities to pursue different kinds of out of the box thinking about what we can do for work and to bring in income. So, things we can do to bring it in, but also things that we can do from different locations, from different settings that reduce the amount of overhead we have. Those things have changed, and that has then opened up opportunities that weren't there before. And this may be the kind of solution that is just what you've been waiting for, just the breath of fresh air, just the sort of change at this juncture in your career that you've been looking for. I would sure love to hear from you about what you're thinking about on these topics. I've talked a lot about the upside. What do you think are some of the downsides connected with these ideas? I did mention last week about the decluttering thing. That's definitely a downside. In fact, in both options, it's a downside, right? To move into a tiny house, we have to declutter. To sell and move out and pack our bags for slow travel options, we're not bringing a whole bunch of stuff with us for that either. So, okay, there's one potential downside that ultimately probably has a great upside to it on the other side. But what else can you think about? What are the factors with that? I'd love to join you in conversation in the comments. All right. Thanks for joining me this weekend for this reflection. I'll be back with more in the middle of the week. And until then, do take care. Talk to you soon.